Hey guys, this is episode 63, and it's part of a two-part series with episodes 63 and 64, where I have a real discussion and the birth story from Bobby and Lesley and their child, Sojourner Wildfire. What an amazing name, right? It first came to be that I had met Bobby many years ago at a little musical venue in Charlotte, North Carolina called the Evening Muse. Bobby's a great musician, and he happens to play with one of my best friends, Bucky Hayes. Bucky and his wife, Amy, who was featured in last week's episode 62 with Homebody Movement, introduced me to this article from New York Magazine's The Cut that was then later picked up by USA Today. And it was on gender creative parenting or gender open parenting. And the title of the article was, "It's a THEYBY. Is it possible to raise your child entirely without gender from birth? Some parents are trying." Not only did the article just captivate me and capture my attention, but it really hit home. You see, when this article came out in 2018, I had just learned that my husband was a transgender woman. And we were embarking on a journey of raising our children with a transgender parent, and they were only 3 and 4 years old. This article opened my eyes, and the following 2 episodes with Bobby and their partner, Lesley, really helped me in my healing journey and especially in my growth journey, learning more about gender identity, gender expression, parenting, and how to move forward in my own life with unconditional love. And to top it all off, they have an incredible birth journey and birth story. I hope that you will stick around for both episodes. If you're pregnant now, have you ever considered gender open parenting? Is it something that's on your mind? I would love to hear from you. All right, let's get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does a day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them and you deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast and absorbing all of the information that you need for an amazing pregnancy and birth. My pregnancy guidebook and journal called Birth Story is available at birthstory.com. And as a listener of this podcast, I want you to have $5 off. I want you to listen to this podcast and engage with the book. So just use code BirthStoryPodcast when you get to checkout. It is my thank you for supporting me. This pregnancy guidebook and journal is the best gift for you or anyone you know that is expecting. It's a 42 week-by-week guide to your pregnancy. It has birth affirmations, weekly journaling prompts with a full page for journaling every single week. It has all of the information that you need to connect to your pregnancy and have an empowered birth. So thanks for shopping at birthstory.com. Don't forget to use code BirthStoryPodcast for your $5 off. It's also available on Amazon, or if you prefer the audiobook, you can download it on your Audible app or at audible.com. Now, Let's get to this amazing episode. Welcome to the Birth Story podcast. I've got Lesley and Bobby here today, and I actually have a co-host, Colin.
Oh, hey.
Colin, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are?
So I am a doula. I do fertility, birth, postpartum. I own Doula Differently because I believe that everyone's different and we all doula differently. And I'm a big advocate about supporting all birthing people. Language around birth is super important to me. And I grew up in Charlotte, but I lived in Cali, which was awesome because that's where I started my doula career.
So today on the podcast, we have Lesley and Bobby out of Brooklyn. And I was hoping that you guys may take the mic and introduce yourselves.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Heidi, for having us. So I'm Bobby, musician, music teacher, but for the past almost 2.5 years, I've been a stay-at-home parent.
And hi, I'm Lesley, and I'm a designer. I lead design teams that work on mostly digital things like apps and websites and help kind of build digital businesses.
Do you work for yourself or do you work for a company?
I work right now for an agency called Five.
Oh, cool. So Lesley and Bobby, we are going to hear all about your pregnancy and your birth story and a little bit about some parenting ideals. And so before we dig in though, I need to know a little bit more about you guys. So how did you meet? How long have you been together? Tell us a little bit about Brooklyn and what everyday life is like for you guys.
We're counting on our fingers, but how long is always a hard question. I'm I think 2011. Yeah, 9 years.
Yeah, so we've been together almost a decade, and we met at a show that I was performing at in New York, and we were introduced to each other. We were kind of 3 or 4 degrees removed, like a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, maybe even. And and then
I saw Bobby on stage. I liked what I saw.
Did he point at you from the stage?
No, Bobby's very focused when he's playing. Yeah.
Did you like what you heard, though, Lesley? He's a musician.
Of course. That too.
Yeah. I'm going to put a pause in right there, too. Hold on. I just said he. So, Bobby, do you have preferred pronouns?
Oh, my God. I was just about to ask Bobby, too.
Yeah, cool.
I was on your Facebook, it says he, him, they, them. And so I was what would you prefer that I use? Because I just said he. So before we get too far into this podcast, Lesley and Bobby, do you both have preferred pronouns?
For me, it's she, her, and then...
Yeah, for me, I've been starting to use they, them. It would be cool if you use them, but also I think if you use they, them, but I think that given the nature of the stuff we're talking about, and also I'm not triggered or anything by he, him, it's been a very slow transition for me into those pronouns that we could use it as I think it's okay to admit, that people mess up, and I think it's even helpful for people to hear somebody, I'm not saying intentionally mess up, but I think it's helpful. I think people are confused about what to do when they say the wrong pronoun. And I think it just could be valuable for people to hear. So I guess what I'm saying, if there's a slip up, I would just roll with it.
Okay.
What's the slip? Do you want us to use they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like you to, it would be cool if you use they, them for me. But if you slip up, just fix it and move on kind of thing. And
awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to call myself out right now because we are recording a podcast that we are going to be talking a lot about pronouns and gender identity versus biological sex and different things. And so right there, Bobby, this is part of our teaching on this podcast is right there as I'm Lesley, did you like the way he sounded on stage? And let's correct each other. So the preferred pronouns for Bobby are they, them, and preferred pronouns for Lesley, she, her. And so I'm going to re-ask that question, Lesley. Did you like the way they sounded on stage? Did. Yeah. So we didn't make a baby that night. But how old is your child?
He's
so so our kid is 2.5 years old, Is that what the question was? Sorry.
Yeah.
Two and a half.
You want to know which night?
Yeah, you want to know the details.
Bobby was distracted
Is that what this
about
podcast
that they
is?
wanted to.
Well, that could be part of your story. So that's one of the questions that I would like to ask is, did you have a fertility journey, or is this a planned pregnancy or unplanned? Kind of what was the story with getting pregnant?
Yeah, maybe a small journey. Once we decided, I don't know. I like to say it took 3 tries, but once we decided, I think I got pregnant like the first, real like planned try, but I actually had a miscarriage with that pregnancy pretty early on I knew around 6 weeks, and then I had the miscarriage around 10 or 11 weeks. And then, we gave it a little time and space and then tried again, but it didn't take too long. Everything went really well after that.
May I ask a question about your miscarriage?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something people should really talk about.
Yeah. And we don't do enough about sharing about loss, especially like when our inauguration into parenthood is lost in our womb space. So you said you knew at 6 weeks. Is that from like medical interventions you knew, or did you just have a feeling?
Yeah, I think that's when we went for an ultrasound, and the doctor was not finding a heartbeat, but I'm like looking at Bobby. I'm like trying to remember the precise details. The doctor's not finding a heartbeat, and then I think they said it was, maybe we should try again in like a week. Maybe the timing's off, and then had another ultrasound a week later, and it was confirmed that it was not going to be a viable pregnancy. And then it was just debate about or discussion about what to do. I think doctors really push you to, I don't know the name of the procedure, do a kind of removal procedure. And I didn't want to do that. So I remember I tried some pills that are supposed to induce the miscarriage. I tried 3 rounds of that, which is fun to take a pill and then sit home and like kind of wait for something to happen. That didn't work all the 3 times. And then I tried some acupuncture. I can't say for sure what finally took place for the miscarriage to finally happen, but I did some acupuncture, took some herbs from my acupuncturist, and then I also ran a marathon. And then I had the miscarriage the next day. So maybe all of those things, maybe none of those things, maybe it was just timing. But that time between like 6 weeks and 11 weeks was really kind of strange and hard.
Yeah.
Can we talk about how amazing it was that you just casually mentioned, I ran a marathon?
I know.
Like just run of the mill. I ran a marathon. I can barely walk a mile. So I'm very impressed with you.
Right. So you're pregnant. You know that a miscarriage is coming. And I'm assuming, do you train for a marathon, or are you just marathon ready?
No, I'm not that fit. No, we were both actually really training pretty seriously together. And then I got pregnant. It kind of happened like more quickly than we thought. And so I, sort of stopped. I don't know, actually we kept running a little bit, but, I took it down a notch just to like see what was up with the pregnancy. And then, and then wasn't really training as well. So I'm a little like kind of competitive with myself, especially when it comes to sports. So since I fell off my training, I wasn't going to run the marathon because I didn't think I would get my best time. But my acupuncturist, who is so awesome, also stepping in as a therapist, was like, Lesley, what's the worst that can happen? And I said, I don't know. I have a miscarriage like on the marathon course. And she's like, let me tell you how miscarriages work. You're not just going to like start bleeding and fall down in the middle of the road. You'll have like little cramps, and then maybe like a little bleeding, and then you'll like get in a car and you'll go home. It'll be fine. And so, that's sort of what's the worst that's going to happen. Talk really motivated me to go ahead and do it. Bobby and I ran together. That was the other thing that was awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's incredible. So who had to pace for who?
Bobby was in much better shape.
Yeah. But
you lagged in the middle, and then I fell apart at the end.
I want to point out that and I'm glad you brought this subject up. Lesley was I just think like a warrior, because I don't know if you remember, but like a lot, basically after we found out that about the miscarriage, that it was inevitable, Lesley basically stopped. There was no space for talking about a marathon. So Lesley just like stopped, and we didn't even really talk about training. And then she just like basically approached me and was like, I think I want to still do this race. And so it was no longer about like getting a fast time or anything like that. It was just like, I just was like amazed that she wanted to run, given, you know, just how like just where all our emotions were at. So I was just in awe, and it really was like an incredible experience.
It's such like a beautiful foreshadowing too. I'm very big about like paradigm shifting. They compare birth and laboring and pregnancy so much to running a marathon. And so the fact that she did that successfully is so beautiful to look at, that she still had that, you know, capability and that passion and that drive to do something that was coming, which is really amazing.
Yeah. And this is the language that we use when we're doing childbirth education, is like preparing for a marathon. So here you were in the middle of it. Lesley, I'm going to ask you both actually a personal question. I'm going to start with you, Lesley. When you were going through the first pregnancy and the miscarriage, did you already feel like a mom?
I don't think so. I think it still kind of felt more like a concept. And then related note, but maybe a small deflection. I don't really call myself a mom now. Even I don't know. I've never really like gravitated towards it. I'm not like offended if someone says like, "Hey, Wildfire's mom," but I don't know. Bobby and I both chose not to use mom and dad. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like me. So that would also probably be the other reason I didn't feel like a mom then, because I don't know. I don't think in my mind that's what I was preparing for.
Yeah. Well, I guess I will rephrase that for Bobby then too, and I ask that because parents interpret miscarriages very differently, sometimes when one is carrying and one is not. And so it sounds like you guys were really connected in that experience. But Bobby, I wanted to see from like your parental perspective, like what that was like for you.
It was a big change, the idea of getting pregnant and having a kid. So like I was working on kind of overcoming my fears. I was almost like, I guess you could say, you know, the phrase, you know, fake it till you make it kind of thing. And I was really like trying to be like as psyched up as I can in a way to just kind of like really, I don't know, really like get used to the idea, even though I was like terribly scared of becoming a parent. And I was like, maybe like even overly felt like a parent, I think, because of how hard I was leaning into it to overcompensate for my own fears. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I think it makes 100% sense. You know, I think it's one of those things, just like the fake it till you make it. It's almost like the practice of radical acceptance, where you're like, okay, we're doing this. We're going to make this happen. And like, how do I move forward? And then it sort of becomes part of your being, where you just accepted that you're doing it. And so how do I do this successfully? And how do I do this as the best version of me? Which I think is amazing. I wanted to ask, so y'all don't use the term mom and dad. What term do you prefer?
Oh, we consider ourselves parents.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, to other people, and to Wildfire, we go by our names. So they just,
very cute.
Wildfire calls us Bobby and Lesley.
Little Bobby Lesley.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay, this is incredible, but we haven't yet addressed how amazing the name Wildfire is.
God, it's so cool.
I mean, before this interview, what was our top name, Colin?
My client's name, her baby is Juniper Fawn.
Yes, so I would say Juniper Fawn was at the top of our list.
She had a bonnet named after her. So now we're going to have to submit something to have Wildfire, named after them.
Yes, I think Wildfire. Does Wildfire have a middle name? Does it get better?
Oh my God, I bet.
So actually, so their full name is like, so Wildfire is their middle name. Their full name is Sojourner Wildfire Floyd.
So what you're saying is it does get cooler.
Yeah.
There's like a story for like each of those names.
Yeah.
Okay, tell it. I think namesake is so important, and I would love for Wildfire to hear this one day and understand more about their namesake.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do it. And I'll try to condense it, but like, so obviously it was like, Sojourner speaks for itself. You know, they're named after Sojourner Truth. Yeah, it was important for, I think, me to have, or at least very powerful for me to have their name connect with Black history. And this was the name and person that resonated with me the most, I think. Yeah, so they're named after Sojourner Truth. And then Wildfire is the nickname of a Black sculptor from the 19th century, maybe turn of the century. And I just like, I don't know, first of all, I love the way it sounds, and it's got a connection to nature, which we were kind of like looking at. They were born December 2017. So this is like us trying to come to grips with like, I mean, what's been like a really messed up system forever, but like, you know, Trump in office. And so like, I love the idea of a wildfire is this like, it's a beautiful process in nature, and where like everything gets kind of burned to the ground to make for new growth. Mm-hmm. And to me, it's such a beautiful metaphor for what I see is like, figuratively speaking, obviously, but like what I see needs to be done to a lot of these systemic issues that we have, that we're trying to like kind of just plug up the leaks. So I really like that name as a metaphor. And then their last name is Floyd, which is not either our last names. And it's named after a town that we had our commitment ceremony in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. It's basically my favorite place in the world. And we couldn't decide on a last name, like between the two of us, nothing felt right. So we just.
And both names was way too long.
Both names. Yeah. We actually, for like 1 week, for about 1 week, their name was Sojourner Wildfire Fleischman McCullough. And then we were just like, what are we doing? Like, I mean, Lesley doesn't have the same last name as me. I don't have the same last name as her. And then to give Wildfire Fleischman McCullough, they wouldn't even have the same last name as us. They'd have like this hybrid. It just was like, I don't know, just like everything else. We just like kind of question why we're doing something. And I kind of like, love to question why we do the things we do in society. And I didn't really come up with like a good, strong answer about why I needed their last name to be the same when we don't have the same last name. So
and some people were like, that's going to be problematic. And we're like, give us an example. I dare you. You can't come up with any real reason why you have to have the same last name.
Yeah. It's so yeah.
So I just want to do a quick recap.
Say it one more time.
No. They have an amazing name.
I thought about it a little bit.
Yeah, we put a lot of thought. There was like a lot of panic. This was like some down to the wire type stuff. I mean, like.
Yeah, also, we were still debating. And Wildfire was actually born like 3 weeks early. So then, you're like in the hospital with those papers staring at you. We're like, I don't know.
We were literally like Wildfire sleeping in like whatever, like a bassinet, next to the bed, in the hospital. And Lesley and I just like writing the names, like changing the order, going back and forth, like what are like really deciding. I mean, like as last minute as it gets. So and then we still went back and changed the last name.
Yeah, we did. We changed it after we left, like a week later.
I think we can speak. I'm going to speak for Heidi. You nailed it.
Yeah, you guys nailed it.
Last minute, you nailed it.
We're going to get into parenting and talking about, parenting with different pronouns, parenting without the concept of gender identity and biological sex and that kind of thing. And so, and we had to take a turn when my kids were about 2 or 3 years old down this journey that Lesley and Bobby, you guys started on, it sounds like. But with this namesake and Sojourner and Wildfire and Floyd and Maximus and Danger. And one of the things that I tell my own child that's very important is that like mommy and daddy took a guess. We looked at your biological sex and we took a guess. But at any point you have the right to tell us that you don't like your name, you don't like your first name, your middle name, your last name, and that maybe the that the pronouns that we're using don't identify with you. And so my 6 and 4-year-old very much have an understanding of that. But I wanted to bring that up because namesake is part of this freedom too. Like we give these names, but I think it's also important that we give our children the freedom at any point to change or choose even the most radically cool name like Sojourner Wildfire. So, okay, so Lesley and Bobby, as we dig into your birth story and your parenting journey a little bit deeper, I want to just back up before we move forward, and that's on this podcast specifically is about advocacy. And so the first mention of advocacy in your story was not letting or allowing the doctors to tell you what to do with your body when you were having a miscarriage. And so I think it's really important for anyone who's listening, if you happen to suffer a loss, that you still have choice. You still have autonomy and authority over your body. You can choose to miscarry naturally, which can take many, many weeks, more than a month, for your body to let go of the pregnancy, and that there isn't a sense of urgency to let go of the pregnancy unless you choose that for your body in combination with your provider. So I have a lot of respect for you, Lesley, that I heard advocacy from the very beginning of your birth journey. And so I want to share that. And so I'm going to pivot with that tidbit of information. So you discover that you're pregnant again. And this is where I'm really just have like a healthy curiosity for your vision for parenting. Was this language around like the things that we've already talked about, like not feeling like mom or dad, but feeling more like Lesley and Bobby or like a parent? And how did you arrive at the decision, or was it not even a decision at all? It just is that you would raise your child just to be a child?
I don't think we had much of any of that sort of figured out in advance. It kind of evolved as we were, just getting closer and like imagining this new life and like sharing news and thinking about how it felt when we were sharing news and updates. And I don't know, Bobby remembers very vividly this article that inspired them for us to go down this gender open parenting journey.
Yeah, I'm also not sure about the titles, but it probably was a mix of hearing people kind of refer to us that way before Wildfire was born, and it not feeling, at least for me, it not feeling right. Yeah, so we do something called gender open parenting, which is also called gender creative parenting. And it was brought to my attention that this was even an option while Lesley was pregnant, this second pregnancy. I read an article about a Canadian parent who was fighting to not have a gender or sex marker on their kid's health card. It's a little different in Canada, but basically just like pretty much like a birth certificate or something like that, or like a passport or something. Yeah. So in the article, it said that this parent, they didn't assign their kid a sex or gender at birth, and was, using neutral pronouns, they, them, until their kid was old enough to decide on their own. And then they would go with whatever the kid wanted. And it was, to me, it was very, very, very quick. Like basically as soon as I read it, it just completely aligns with everything else we already believe in the way that we think about basically adults and kids already. We just never thought about it being an option that we could just give our kid like this blank canvas. And yeah, so I called Lesley like pretty much right after I finished the article. I was like so excited that she asked me to basically like, okay, like take a breath and like, we'll talk about it when I get home from work. And we did, and it didn't take that long. It didn't take that long for us to like really like kind of, I don't think so, right? To like,
I don't think I knew anyone using those pronouns at the time. So there was like sort of a lot of newness to digest, but like conceptually it made total sense. It was just sort of like operationally, logistically, like what, there were just like, I don't know, things to wrap my head around. And then I was like, oh yeah, no, this does make sense. This is great.
I think it's so amazing that you provided Wildfire the gift of a blank canvas. So in the sense that this is something, the type of parenting, that is organically developed for y'all. It's one of those things where if you have a piece of art and you want to turn it into something new, you have to do a lot more work to make it a new canvas. However, if you start with something blank, you get to put a totally different amount of effort in. And you gave your child such a gift to start their path with a blank canvas that they get to make beautiful in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I dig it. I mean, to keep with I've never actually even used that analogy before. It just kind of came up, but I haven't used it in this sense, but to keep, and I guess the idea is like that we're giving them like all the colors of paint, to kind of all the experiences, all the different types of art mediums and, to kind of like, so that they, have like all these choices, and beyond. So, yeah, listen, the short version is we would never assume anybody's sex or gender based on their genitals. So like we just applied that to our baby. And that's it.
Well, I really appreciate you guys taking a stand on this and speaking out and being on the podcast. And I just can't wait to dig into your birth story and kind of a little bit of logistics with like family and nursing staff and providers. And, there's, a million questions come up. But I just first, before we proceed, just want to say thank you and how important this type of parenting is, because it prevents situations like mine where my partner found themselves at 35 years old, married, in love with their soulmate, a parent to 2 children, and wasn't raised with the freedom to think and create and be. And it turns out from the time my partner was born, they identified more as a girl and as a female and as a mom. And, I hope that with more gender open parenting, that we have just more, less of my story and less of Kaylee, my partner's story, and more, and less suicidality and suicide attempts like hit our family firsthand. So like it's this concept we're just kind of talking about, but the consequence of not doing this and not having this conversation is raising another generation of humans to be confused or ashamed or put into a box. Then they end up 35, married, trying to take their life because they don't think that the people around them love them enough to just let them be who they are. And so thankfully in our story, and why I'm having you guys on the show and why this is such an important topic to me is like, thankfully my partner came home and wrote me a letter and said her truth, and around her was an entire family and friends and of people ready to just allow her to become. So it's very different when we just allow our children to just become from the time that they're born without their biological sex getting in the way. So there's my preach.
What's interesting, I am a member of the LGBTQI plus community, and the terminology even within that community compared to how it is now was almost made me feel like I was put in a box because I didn't identify with some of the specific letters that were available at the time. And so it's one of those things where I really struggled with who I was, because even in a more, community that I identified with, I felt like I didn't have my niche. I felt like I didn't have my place. And it was really hard for me because I was trying to navigate who I was and who I identified with. And so the fact that you're providing a type of parenting from the beginning to allow Wildfire to, understand that they don't have to put themselves in a box, that their box can be Wildfire, and that is
burn it up, Wildfire.
Yep,
burn up the box.
Yeah. And it's just, it's amazing the way that you've let everything organically develop.
I love that Lesley just went with it. She's like, yeah. I mean, it speaks a lot about your partnership. I think it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, I love it.
I just wanted to add, first of all, I mean, I'm so incredibly happy that Kaylee is here and living, and it sounds like thriving. And, so I think an important statistic to know is that it's like over 40% of trans people attempt suicide. So that's a lot. It's a lot. It's an alarming number. It's a number that we should, like, as a society, be like ashamed of. And you have, if you take, I mean, I don't know how I know that these numbers are not accurate, because it's not a safe. We don't live in a safe. It's not safe for every trans person to come out. But if you take the current statistics and you look at the percentage of people that are trans, and then you do the math and you add the percentage of, you take the 40+% that will attempt to take their life. As a parent, you have more of a chance of having a trans kid who attempts at some point suicide than you do having a kid that drowns. And if you think about all the precautions that we take to prevent kids from drowning, we take it very seriously. It only makes sense to take this statistic very seriously.
From my research and going through this experience with Kaylee, like kind of what we have found in the groups that we support in is that on a daily basis, Kaylee doesn't feel safe. The data suggests that any trans person, like the death rate, it's the murder rate. The murder rate of trans persons per year is disproportionately higher for trans persons. I didn't know if that added an extra layer at all into your parenting decision. If
gender, what we're doing with Wildfire, like our parenting style, our decision to not assign them a sex or gender and use they them pronouns, this is like way bigger than our family. This is way bigger than even gender open parenting. This is about like the safety and well-being and just like rights of trans and queer people. It's about like a societal shift and away from super problematic thinking, such as like sex and gender as a binary, and like how hurtful that can be. And also just like, our ideas about, associating body parts with genders and sex. And so this is like, we feel like this, it's like we're part of a broader fight, like and this is way bigger than us.
Yeah. Well, I'm fighting it, standing by your side. And I'm just kind of, I feel like I'm almost doing it in reverse. Like I started parenting in one way and now I'm wildly parenting in a different way.
Because we're not going to be here forever, but they will be. And so making that mark on our children is a huge deal.
Yep. And the advocacy is never ending. And so part of the advocacy piece I really want to dig into, especially if anyone's listening to this podcast, and this is like, there's going to be someone, Lesley and Bobby, who like this podcast is like that Canadian article that you read for them. And that's going to be a changer. And so, not to pressure us into your birth story, Lesley.
That's why I could only hope. I mean, that would be amazing.
Yeah, because I really want to talk about where the advocacy begins in the pregnancy, through the labor, through the birth, the delivery, and then, we need 10 more podcasts to talk about like the parenting journey, right? But if someone's pregnant right now and they're listening and this is really resonating, Lesley, I just want to I want to take a turn, and I want both you and Bobby to share how did your pregnancy go? And after making this decision, how did you communicate this choice with family, friends, coworkers? Just if you could kind of take me from finding out you were pregnant to Bobby coming home with this article, making this decision, and then how the rest of your pregnancy unfolded for both of you.
Yeah, like specifically with the gender open parenting.
Well, I mean, just your pregnancy also. Like, how did you feel? Like, did you have hypertension? Were you totally healthy? Yes, I would love to know like all about your pregnancy, and then kind of sprinkled in, I should say, primary focus on how your pregnancy was, and then sprinkled in how those conversations went, like with like, did you have a baby shower? Did people, as soon as you get the 20-week ultrasound, if you even choose to have it, side note, they want to know, did you find out the biological sex of your child? And then they want you to share that with them. And so, yeah. I mean, I think like sort of physically, it was just was like pretty great, pretty easy as far as pregnancies go. I feel really lucky with that. I mean, the first few months, I was just kind of like, there was, a little nauseous, a little low energy, but nothing that really stopped my work or anything like that. And then from there, I just stayed like really active, and I didn't really have. I feel very lucky. I didn't really have any problems at all. Oh, good. Did you keep running?
Can't think of anything. I kept running through, I had like 22 or 24 weeks, something like that in my mind. And I only stopped because I just felt like as I would kind of make my way we live next to like a really big park, because I would kind of cut through the streets, make my way to the park to go running. I don't think I was being paranoid. I think this was really happening, but people would kind of like, I could tell they were like watching, and they would point, and I heard someone go, "That's not good." And I was like, maybe I'll just take my exercising journey inside. Like it was just making me uncomfortable, but I'm pretty well aware that is safe and healthy to do. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. So did you have some of the normal tests done, like gestational diabetes tests, the ultrasounds? Like, tell me like what your care plan was. Were you planning a home birth, a hospital birth, a birth center birth? Were you working with a midwife, a free birth? I mean, I don't really know anything about what you planned for your prenatal care.
Yeah. So like many things with us, that aspect was a real evolution. And it's like, as we learned more about the kind of choices you could make or the options that were out there, we like kind of did a 180. But I started off like with I wasn't really thinking about it. It was like a very medical kind of experience. Like I was seeing a doctor at Weill Cornell who was amazing, but I only went there because I got a referral from, a friend who was like having some fertility challenges. And then I was 38 when I was pregnant. And so, everyone it was planted in my mind that I was like high risk and I should go to like a high risk doctor at Weill Cornell. And, they like interview you to decide if they're going to take you on. And so, I was like accepted by this doctor, and that's what I was doing. So it was real like textbook, like, a bazillion ultrasounds, like all the tests, they like, measured maybe twice. I think most people only do that one, all those things. And I got like super paranoid about the statistics just around like chromosomal, like, is that the right word? Chromosome abnormalities. And so decided to do a CVS. And of course, like with all last minute decisions, decided to do that like the day before the deadline. But, Yeah. And so that felt like hyper medical. And then somewhere after we got a doula, who are the most amazing people in the world, and this doula started asking us like questions about what we had in mind for birth, what was like our ideal sort of birth story and birth journey. And then we just started to learn so much more about the options. And we were like, and actually our doula was really cool. She's like, I'm not supposed to tell people what to do or make recommendations. I'm just here to support you in what you want. She's like, but I don't think you're at the right hospital. Like, I don't think that this setup is going to give you what you want. Have you considered a midwife? And so kind of last minute, around 30 weeks, we just went into like hyper. We're like, yes, that is what we need. And we went to like hyper research mode, trying to find a midwife that would also take insurance and would also take, accept a client like so far along in pregnancy. But yeah, we ended up with a great midwife that I think I saw twice before going to labor.
And was the midwife for home birth or for hospital birth or birth center birth?
Yes, that was also part of the consideration. I think in my mind, I kind of wanted to do a home birth, but I just couldn't get out of my head, like, you're 38, there might be a problem. And so I just kind of chose this middle ground where we chose a midwife who delivered in a hospital that has a birthing center. So ideally I would be in like a birthing center room. But obviously then there was like the option the staff and equipment for more medical intervention if it came to that.
Yeah, I think that was beautifully said, as a middle ground. So
yeah.
I really, do you want to give your doula a shout out, because they sound really amazing?
Yeah, Molly Lorienzo. Yeah, she was great.
Okay.
Actually, I think Bobby like basically interviewed all of the doulas and presented. Bobby did so much of the hard work during this pregnancy to like make this birth what we wanted it to be. But yes, Bobby found Molly, and then we talked and we met, and we all felt really great about it.
Yeah, good job. Good job. So Bobby, how was this pregnancy for you?
I mean, again, like the first one, I think at some point I just like went into go mode. I was starting to like reduce the amount of hours that I was working in preparation to kind of be around more and eventually be fully a stay-at-home parent. So I had the time to do a lot of the research. And yeah, I think a lot of doulas actually found it odd that I was meeting, like I was just going by myself, like to meet.
And when we switched to the midwife, people had an even stranger reaction.
That's right. And then I met a bunch of midwives.
Are you a birthing parent?
Yeah. But, Lesley was just busting her ass at work, and so that's how we had to do it. That's how we were able to get things done. We really like make a good team in that way. But yeah, it was great. I mean, it was, I was so happy that Lesley had a pretty easy go this pregnancy, and it's pretty.
It's good. I would wish that type of pregnancy to everyone.
And I think what people need to hear, Lesley and Bobby, from you too, is that it's not too late to ever change when you are pregnant and you are planning your birth. I mean, especially we're recording this like July 16th, 2020. It's in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And there's a lot of changes going on in birthing, and people making last minute decisions to home birth or to birth center, or switching to midwives, or something in your pregnancy has you go the other direction and switching to obstetrician care. And so I think that's an important part of your story, is that it is never too late to be able to speak up and use your voice and change. And so good for your doula to have prompted that, and for Bobby to have been available to go and interview and make that happen. So I want to answer the question, like everyone that listens to this podcast is like, how did you know that you were in labor? What does the day of labor look like? And you already gave us like a little hint that Wildfire was born 3 weeks early. And so I'm dying to know like what happened. Yeah, I totally am going to stop there. So skip ahead to episode 64 for the full birth story of Sojourner Wildfire with Bobby and Lesley, and to learn just a little bit more about gender open parenting. Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan, and prepare for the birth you